Hello, everyone. Welcome. Oh, that went very bright all of a sudden, and this microphone's really low down. Let me move it up slightly. That's better. Welcome, everybody, to your session with Jacob Mills, who's going to be talking to you about communication and collaboration within the games industry. Hope you enjoy today's session, and we want you all to get involved. In Industry Week, it's a really exciting event for Confetti, and we always have loads of really interesting things for students to participate in. Remember, you can participate in it as well directly by taking photographs of the events that are taking place and uploading them on social media, on Instagram or Twitter. If you tag them with the hashtag IW22, you can be entered into the photo competition, and the best photographs are going to be voted by the students as usual every year, and the winner of the best photograph from Industry Week will get a £50 Amazon voucher, which is not to be sniffed at. If there is an emergency in here, which we hope there isn't, although, interestingly, I don't even know if Jacob is aware of this, but when Jacob did his talk last year at the online event, there was a fire evacuation in the middle of Jacob's talk. Yeah, we had to evacuate the building. So Jacob was talking basically to himself in a room. Obviously, all the online students were watching it. But yeah, the whole tech team, everybody, we had to go outside for about 15 minutes because there was a fire evacuation. It was very, very surreal. And Jacob was completely unaware of it until this moment, it would appear. Yeah. So if there is a fire or an emergency, then we just head to the nearest fire exit and we go to the corner of Brook Street, which is just to the right of this building. So hopefully that won't happen this time. Yeah, okay. So over to Jacob, and I'll leave you to it. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Hello. Sorry, just setting up a timer so that I don't overrun. Can we all hear me? All right? Been a while since an in-person event, so this is all very new and scary. Yeah, okay, I'll dive right in. Hello, I am Jacob Mills, and I've come up with a really catchy title for this talk I'm going to give you today. It is on the importance of communication and collaboration in game development in general, and level design in particular, with special consideration given to working from home. So it's not that concise, but it is thorough, and it should give you an idea of what I'm talking about today. Before I dive in, a little bit about myself. I am currently a senior 3D level designer at Roll7. If you haven't heard of Roll7, they're a UK-based studio, fully remote, kind of indie, and they've just brought out an excellent game called Odd Oily World, which I can really, truly say is excellent because I'm not working on that at all. I have nothing to do with it. I'm working on something completely different that I'm not allowed to talk about. So all my examples from Roll will be ambiguous and vague in nature. Before that, I was a level designer at Ubisoft in Leamington. Mostly working on Tom Clancy's The Division 2, a Ubisoft original. On the base game, I was in the open world, so kind of 5x5 block of open world, doing side missions and activities and stuff in there. And then after that, for the DLC, working on some DLC missions for Year 1 content, which was very cool. And then for about 6 or 7 months, I was working remotely for Ubisoft Toronto on Far Cry 6, so that was very cool. Before that, I was at TT Games working on about 1 million Lego games because they make about 1,000 a year. So Lego Marvel, Lego Dimensions, Lego Marvel again, more Lego Dimensions. So that was really cool. That was a big variety of IPs: Sonic, Scooby-Doo, Mission Impossible, Simpsons, all kinds of weird stuff. So that was very good. Yeah. So before that, I was a student, like you, but I was at Queen's University Belfast. As you can see, it was like a 5-year course. So it was like the longest course that I could find as far away from home, but within the UK that I could get. But that was good. It was a very kind of technical focused course. It was basically their computing course, but with a few games modules. Yeah, but while I was there, I did a couple of placements. So one after my second year in summer as an intern at Infosys in India, so that was very cool because I got to go to India for 10 weeks. And then another one after my third year, before my master's year, at Sony in London, working on the test and release team before the run-up to the PS4 launch, which was very cool. And these were very technical, not so designy. I got into design later when I joined TT. And my secret kind of origin story is that my very first industry job was that I was a QA tester at Free Radical Design here in Nottingham when I was about 18 for all of about 6 weeks, because all the funding got pulled and the project went under and everyone got laid off and the studio went under. But something about that experience said to me, I want to work in this industry. This is the job for me. And let's not interrogate that too closely. It all worked out. Whatever. Here I am. So yes, that's my quick snapshot into my history. So whether I'm qualified to talk about this stuff or not, at least I have this range of experience to draw on, right? And I want to highlight that this is my route into the industry, but there's no such thing as a typical route. Like, every person you join will have a different story. And yeah, I'm talking about communication and collaboration today, but like, I'm by no means an expert. This is all just stuff that I've picked up on the job, right? But that's why I'm here. I'm trying to give you a bit of a head start on this stuff. But yeah, a good range of experience, at least, different size studios, different genres of game, all that good stuff, essentially. But yeah, I can only speak from my experiences, my biases, my privileges, all that good stuff. So like I say, I am talking about communication and collaboration, and I can imagine if I was a student, the first question I would ask is why? I'm a level designer, right, and I've worked in the industry a number of years. Why not talk about something cool and sexy, like engines, tools, level design best practices, processes? Like, communication and collaboration, they're kind of like, they're soft skills, right? These are soft skills. And I'm imagining an argument with you, and now I'm going to have that argument with you. So first off, what are soft skills? Well, we have to define hard skills and soft skills, and I've already put them derisively in quotes so you can see where I'm going with this. Hard skills are kind of defined as like technical skills, right? Related directly to the discipline that you're in. So for me, as a level designer, hard skill is level design. I have to make layouts and script levels together so that they work. I have to make things good for the player, facilitate the gameplay. I have to actually make it work. I have, when player presses button, door opens, bad guys come in, that kind of thing. You have to actually do the stuff in engine, hard skill. Same with game design, right? So keeping it in the design family just because I'm a designer. You have to be able to design systems. You have to be able to design mechanics. You have to know how spreadsheets work. You have to know how to iterate on these things and make it actually good. Coding, you have to be able to code. That's like an obvious one. Art, whether it's 3D, 2D, environments or character, you need to be able to actually pick up a pen and paper or brush and canvas or stylus and tablet and actually make the art, right? And that's a skill that you learn, practice, hone, goes on forever. It's a hard skill, and so on. Soft skills, so-called soft skills, are things like communicating. So not tied to any one discipline, right? So communication, you need to be able to do talk good and write an email. Presenting with confidence, maybe. Organization, you need to turn up, do your job goodly. Take initiative, be part of a team, have leadership qualities. These kind of things that are, like I say, less tied to the discipline, less tangible in a way, but a kind of part of any job, right? An expected part of any job. And you'd kind of think that if it's an expected part of everyone's job, everyone's going to be adept at it, right? Everyone's going to be adept at it, right? I'm gonna call some fights and take a big risk and do some audience participation. Who's done a group project recently, like within the last year or so? Anyone? Hands up. Yeah, good. And now the good bit. Keep your hands up if that went exactly as you wanted. It went well. It went as you expected, as planned, as anticipated. Everyone pulled their weight. You all agreed on a direction. You all went in that direction. It was executed perfectly, right? I'd strongly wager that it didn't go that way. And that's because I was at university and did some group projects and things went horribly wrong, as they do. And I'm not here to sow dissent. Don't be bitter. This is the point of the talk, right? This is why I'm here. And one thing that I do think is really worth bearing in mind is that this is a very human thing. We do a lot of retrospectives at Roll 7, so every milestone will go over what went well and what didn't. But before each one, our producer likes to quote this guy called Norm, who came up with the retrospective prime directive, which I'm just going to quote here, which is, regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. And it's just nice to go in knowing that there was no malice. It's just, incompetence or whatever. But the point is, this is a human problem. We are all human. Humans are flawed, and that doesn't stop once you get a job. It doesn't stop once you enter the industry. Everyone's still figuring this stuff out and battling the same demons. It continues. So, sure, hard skills, they're really tough to master. Like, absolutely, like, it takes time. That's why we're all here, right? That's why we're learning and trying to get good at what we do. But like, so are soft skills. They're not, you know, I think soft is just the wrong word for them. They're very difficult skills, right? So we've established why these things are difficult. But why are they important? Why important? And I think this question is hiding another question. Like, to answer why is this important, we have to ask, who does a game dev need to talk to? Who do I actually talk to in my job? Who do the people around me have to talk to in their job? And I think there's another question behind this one, which is, how are games made? And hopefully you've got some idea of this by now. But I know that just from watching things like, you know, NoClip and GMTK and stuff on YouTube, you can almost get an idea that, like, someone kind of comes with you for an idea, and then a team of people say, yeah, and then, you know, we made it. It's incredible. Everything works out. But that's not quite it, right? But if you'll humor me, we'll kind of go along this imaginary game development path, and then we'll pick it apart, and then we'll talk about the real deal. So you kind of imagine that, like, idea comes from a director, Kojima, whoever, and he says, we're going to make Fortnite. And then, okay, to do that we need an engine, so they make an engine, and we're also going to need a story and some characters and stuff. So while we're working on that, game design get the engine, and it's like, okay, this is the kind of game we're making. I need tools, I need gameplay. Let's make that happen. We pump all that stuff into characters because, you know, the narrative, they need the characters to make the story, and we need the characters to work in the game and the rest of it, and so they need to animate. They need VFX for, like, shooting guns or casting spells or whatever. In the meantime, level designers like me are making grey boxes, you know, putting cubes in, and then once we've made all the cubes, we give it to environment artists who make it look good, you know, replace all the cubes with cars, fountains, rocks, trees. And once they've done that, they hand it over to lighting, and things get lit. And then we wrap back around to VFX, because that's all tied together. Technical art, so the game needs to run, so it goes from 15 FPS to 60 FPS, incredible. And then they hand it off to audio, and they just plug all the sounds in, and then to QA to bug test, and then to everyone else to bug fix, and then we release, and we have a big party, and everything's great. So if we take this imaginary game development cycle and look at who I need to talk to as a level designer, well, I need to talk to the people that are giving me the tools and the gameplay mechanics that I need to plug into levels. And then I'm talking to the environment artists, right? I just give them a bunch of great cubes, and then we get The Last of Us Part 2. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. This is unrealistic. This may resemble, some would say, a waterfall, which you may have learned about, which isn't a thing. I'm sure it is a thing somewhere, but it doesn't work very well. And even if, well, I mean, the problems with this are numerous. If one part of this chain goes wrong, right, the whole thing will fall apart. And even if the thing went really well, if you were doing it really good, you would just create this kind of huge backlog of work for the next people, and then they wouldn't be able to do anything. So it wouldn't work whether it worked or not, right? And something like, you know, if I just look at this again, there's a lot of kind of the idea of handing over here. Level design hands over to environment art hands over to lighting, and so on. And that concept doesn't really exist. And that's kind of this very belabored point. How are games actually made? So let's do it again, but this time for real. And starting from me this time, not from the top, just because I'm me and I know who I talk to, so I can just go from there. So as a level designer, when I think of the people I need to talk to the most, it's environment art. I make, like I say, a bunch of grey cubes, and then give it to an environment artist. Except, I just said, there's no real such thing as a handover, right? It's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. I will absolutely be making the kind of prototype version of these levels, but ideally from the very start we'll be chatting about what we're making, what kind of beats we want to hit with this, what kind of gameplay I want to achieve, and what kind of mood, you know, art direction, the rest of it that the art needs to achieve as well, where it sits in the game, what kind of game we're making, all that kind of good stuff. So it's very much a two-way street. It's not a handover, it's a conversation from the very start. And each one of these pieces, if you work together, can make the other piece much stronger for it, right? So who do we both need to work with? Lighting. And likewise, you know, once things are arted up, you kind of need to light them. But again, it's not really a handover. That relationship goes both ways. If anything, the lighting kind of needs to be there from the start because that's part of how levels are composed, right? It's like a world will just look flat without a sun, put the sun in, it's like, all right, now we can design these things for our sunsets and sunrises and the rest of it. But even if we pull that all the way back, I need to be talking to the lighting artist as well because I need to be able to see what I'm doing when I'm doing the prototype version of this level, okay? So maybe they'll be providing us some temporary lights that I can just plug in. Maybe I will do a pass and then they'll do a prototype pass so that we can then start assessing budgets and the rest of it. But the point is that we'll all be chatting from the start all the time. So it's the 3 departments, we're all talking to each other, keeping it neat, keeping it simple, it's all good. So who do I need to talk to next? So after environment art, the department that I talk to most next is game design, because the game design and the level design directly affect each other, right? And again, it's a two-way street, and this is the theme. The game design informs the level design as much as the level design informs the game design. So game design says, you're going to be an Italian plumber, he's going to jump on some Goombas, and then maybe there'll be seesaws, moving platforms, the rest of it, here you go. And level design goes away and makes some stuff, and then they'll do something unexpected, like they'll put a Goomba on a platform, a moving platform, and be like, oh my god, we didn't think of that. Obviously that's an oversimplified example, but like that bouncing of ideas is how they evolve and get stronger, right? And again, that happens from the very start. And likewise, we need to implement these things, so gameplay programmers need to be talking to game designers, and gameplay programmers will be feeding back to game designers and giving ideas, talking about limitations, talking about missed opportunities. And likewise, level design will be implementing this stuff, so we'll need to be talking to the people that are actually making this stuff for us to implement. Narrative, where do they fit in? Everywhere, right? In fact, I've already messed up this diagram because there aren't things pointing to game design and potentially even lighting, right? But like, we're keeping the diagram simple and readable, but they'll be need to talking to level design environment art, at least because we're telling a story through our levels, right? And whether that's like the overarching story of the whole level, for example, or like a little micro story where there's just like one room and it's got a chair in it, and next to the chair is a gun. Oh my god, what happened here? Incredible. Character art obviously need to be talking to narrative because there are characters in the story, but they also need to be talking to everyone else because all the characters need to interact with the world, right? And I'm missing a link here to environment art, but we're keeping it simple, we're keeping it neat. Animation, who do they need to talk to? Well, obviously character art, but also game design, because every animation will need to interact with something in the world, right? But in that case, well, I'm missing a link to level design, I'm definitely missing a link to gameplay programming, but I can sneak that in and keep it neat, so it's fine. But just imagine that there's links from animation to environment art, level design, everything as well, because everything will be interacting together. VFX, what needs VFX? Can't really keep it neat anymore. Kind of everything needs VFX. There'll be VFX in the environments, the VFX will have lights attached, the characters will have VFX, animations might have VFX, that's fine. VFX might be used in gameplay to highlight specific things or call stuff out, so be it. Who needs audio? Everyone needs audio. Characters have audio, environments have audio, everything has audio. Audio can be like a game design tool to call out specific things. It's a whole thing. And then, oh yeah, these guys. The game needs to run, right? So they need to talk to everyone. We need to talk chatting from the very start. If you ignore your technical artists, you're screwed, right? For example, in Division 2, if you ever find a line of sight that's over 100 meters long in the open world, you've found a rarity that is technically illegal, and someone has had to work very hard to actually make it work because that's the limitation of the engine. Don't tell anyone that. Okay, so we're going to put all of these people in a bubble, because we need tools, we need engine, everyone needs tools, everyone needs engine, everyone needs to implement stuff, so everyone's chatting to those, they're chatting to each other, and then we've got QA, because everything needs bug testing from the very start, so everyone's chatting to QA forever, right, because we need bugs logged, we need to make sure that things are running as expected. Speaking of running as expected, who actually makes that happen? Production. They weren't even on the last diagram, I don't know who was running that show, but production are the people that, make timelines, scope stuff out, make sure that we can actually make the thing that we're trying to make. A very vital part. They are facilitating all of this horrible web of communication that we got here, and then direction. Obviously, the game needs direction. People need to know what they're making. People need to adhere to that direction and actually make it happen. And then, like, this kind of mysterious process happens that I still don't understand, and a game is made, and then we party. So again, this has been a really long-winded way of saying that game development is a little bit messy, right? It takes work. It takes a lot of people. So wrapping all the way back around, how a game's made, they're made collaboratively. Who does a game dev need to talk to? Everyone. Everyone needs to talk to everyone, and that's why this is important, okay? So enough of that. I'm going to talk about some examples, real-life examples that we can all draw from. And I kind of put the call out on Twitter and asked people, when you've been making games, have there been moments where, you know, communication, let's say error, has really bitten you in the ass? And you kind of get a lot of responses to this because the answer is yes, right? So again, try not to be bitter about it, but you'll see the tone of these responses. Yeah. So the first one is from this guy I know called Scoop. Scoop has been in the industry many years, about twice as long as me, I think, at least. And he's a technical level designer. So here's this particular story. I spent something like 3 months optimizing a bunch of our core Lua scripts. I submitted a massive final change the same day as a programmer who had been optimizing how C was interfacing with Lua. When those change lists collided, a whole bunch of stuff just didn't quite work. And my response to that is, oh no, that's a doozy. Yep, they'd scheduled things to be called less often, so had I. So things got called way less often, and the effects were things like missions just randomly don't seem to progress sometimes. And this is like a very, this is why this is the first example. It's a very typical one, right? We can boil this down to two devs working on related problems in parallel, unbeknownst to one another, right? You can't get more basic than that, right? Just talk. So I can try and offer some solutions here to try and make this talk useful. And this is kind of what I came up with on the back of a napkin. So one problem here is cross-team visibility. There was none. And number two was, where's my heads up? Where's that happening? So cross-team visibility. Where's the public task tracking? Say that 10 times fast. Public task tracking. This is stuff like Jira. All my jobs have used Jira. I can't even list another one. Handsoft? I'm not sure. But why wasn't this like, well, I imagine it was, but the visibility wasn't there. So all these tasks are visible in a database, and everyone kind of knowing like a big milestone timeline, whatever, right? And then you would immediately see like, oh, I'm working on that, but it looks like that team is also working on that. Let's have a chat, right? That kind of thing. Scrum of scrums. It's a mess of words. You get to a point where things are just words and they don't mean anything. But if you don't know what that is, a scrum is like an agile thing. So agile, you work in sprints of 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, to make a feature or a set of features. And every day you're meeting up with everyone involved and having a scrum, but trying to keep it within teams. So a scrum typically be like 8 people is kind of the ideal, but like in reality it can be however many you need. And you basically say, oh, what I did yesterday was this, today I'm doing this, and I'm blocked by this. I need to chat to someone about this. And then you go, okay, right? And then you can unblock each other and you know what each other are working on, and it's all good. And then a scrum of scrums is where like the producer or lead who is in that scrum then goes to another one full of other producers and leads, and they say, oh, my team's working on this, my team's working on this, oh, hang on, we're working on the same thing, let's chat, right? So if that had been in place, great, maybe we could have avoided this situation. And then global heads up had a big changes. What does this mean? Basically just means send an email. And if you work in a big studio, you will get so many emails. We'll chat about that later. But like, maybe an email could have solved this one. But I think in this particular case, it's just like the timing is that bad. If it happened on the same day, it's like, maybe if someone had sent an email, Scoop would have been like, oh, good job I'm not submitting that right now. Then I need to chat about this and make sure we're not colliding. But you can probably already tell from my tone that like I'm not sold on this, right? Like these are huge teams, potentially working across multiple studios, potentially working across multiple time zones. It's really difficult for everyone to talk to each other because of the aforementioned game development situation, right? But maybe this could have helped, maybe not, I don't know. But let's move on to the next one. So this is a guy I know called Kieran. He's a programmer. Again, worked at a number of studios, and this one is similar to the last one, but different, but similar. 2 weeks before ship, here's the real save system. What do you mean the real save system? Oh, the saving up to now had been a temp workaround. Okay, will it just plug in and work the same? No, it's 2 orders of magnitude slower. And we boot up the game, and yep, there's a 3-second stall every 10 seconds of gameplay. We have to spend weeks doing a massive rewrite of how we handle saving. So it's similar. I'd boil this one down to a big feature update as planned, but key stakeholders such as Kieran are unaware. Like this affects his work and huge amounts of game systems, and it was left way too late, and that's bad. So what are the solutions that I can suggest here? Well, I kind of lack imagination. It's just the same stuff. Again, why was this not like listed in a milestone timeline somewhere? Why was this not all tasked up and someone could just point it out and said like, save system, oh, that'll affect my stuff, let's chat about it. And again, global heads up, well, they got a heads up, but way too late. Like, what does he say, a couple of weeks before ship? And then spend weeks rewriting stuff? That's how, that's why day one patches are so big, like stuff like this. So again, the reality of the situation is much the same. It's just like, we can speak with hindsight here, but like really difficult to actually home in on what we could have done. Final example, this one's not from Twitter. This is just from a conversation I was having with someone very recently who wished to remain anonymous. So a game dev. I spent this week working on something that got cut 20 comments deep in a Slack thread that I wasn't tagged in. Oof. The problem, a feature is cut and a key stakeholder is unaware. And I talking to this person, I was asking the same questions. Surely you've got some kind of task tracking. Surely there's a database somewhere where all the features are, and if this feature got cut, you would have known because it would have just, the CEO creative director just cut it. Told the devs in the threads, didn't tell me or production or the head of the studio. The CEO isn't in Jira. Oh. Okay, so the task tracking thing wouldn't have worked out, but surely you had like a stand-up, and at stand-up you would have said that you were working on this thing, and then someone would have known, like, oh, right, no, sorry, that's been cut. And I literally said in the stand-up this morning, this is what I'm doing, and there was no one there to stop me. CEO wasn't there, the devs in the thread have days off, no one else knew. Cool. It's fine, like, well, it's not fine. It's demoralizing, it sucks. This is, I should have warned you, this is the really depressing part of the talk, but it's gonna come up from here. The truth is, like, I don't think we're going to be able to boil this down to a stock set of solutions. We have the benefit of hindsight here. We don't know the exact situations, and we don't know what we could have done to prevent it. But that's why I'm turning around to the kind of real meat of this presentation, which is what can we each do to be part of the solution, right? And that's what I want to really hammer home, is that like these things will happen. You'll likely be a perpetrator of them more than once. I've certainly made mistakes that have caused grief. Everyone has. It's part of the process. But there are a lot of things that we can do to get ahead of it, prevent it, and just try and make it better for everyone. And this was the point, making the development of a game. It's a tricky thing. Just trying to grease the wheels of production and just trying to make it as easy as possible. It's a very difficult thing. No one knows how games are made. Witchcraft. So the example I'm going to draw from is from my Ubisoft days, and it was this mission that I made in Division 2 called Nightclub Infiltration or something. To me, it was just like CA08, like I don't know what it's called. But you infiltrate a nightclub. And so this is one where I think things went well because of all the lessons that I had learned from working on the previous content. This was a DLC mission that we made. It was the last DLC mission that we made for year 1, and I think I've got a couple of videos which at home didn't work, but here we're going to try. So these are a couple of key moments in the mission. This first one is in the first room at the start. Maybe.
Immediate medical assistance needed.
Sorry, I didn't press the 1080p button on that one, so it looked like ass, but I'll figure that out for the next one. Oh god, it's all gone wrong. Right, so why did I bring this up? So there were a few things that happened there, right? And all of this requires a lot of input from a lot of people. So we walk in to a kind of stale lit area. kill a bunch of guys. Obviously, it's the Division. And then lights go off, dum dum dum. So that's lighting and sound there, scripting as well. And then we get a bit of VO coming through the speakers, so that's in world. And then lights come back on, but instead of stale like before, they're cool and purple. And then there's lasers and VFX and music's pumping and stuff, right? So there's a lot going on there. And I have a second example, which is similar. This one was at the start of the mission. This next one is nearer the end. And kind of bear in mind what I just said, like all these different departments, all these different things working together to make moments like this happen. And this time, let me try and make it a decent quality. See how good your Wi-Fi is.
Thank you, Agent.
Just noticed that I gave Tangerine some airtime there. Same thing. What a boomer. Yeah, the second boss was called Tangerine because we got obsessed with that clip of Michael Caine going, "Had a diamond the size of a tangerine." Terrible impression, sorry. Anyway, that was similar, right? So we move up to an object, an interactable object, a body. We interact with it. All the lights go off again, but in a kind of glitchy way. The music goes, you know, all that good stuff. Lights off. Boom! Big explosion. Big hole in the screen. Fire comes out. Guys come out. Start shooting you. The screens are all glitchy. Very cool. And likewise, needed a lot of people, a lot of input. So, how do we make this happen? It needs a lot of buy-in. It needs a lot of buy-in from a lot of people. Firstly, I actually got the urge to make a mission in a nightclub from being at the Division 2 launch party, which is very cool. And I was there with various people. I was like, oh, wouldn't that be cool? Yeah, it would be cool. But the first thing I need to do is convince the artist, right? Can we actually make this? Can we make this with the resources that we have and the time that we have, with the people that we have? And they're like, yeah, we can definitely work something out. It'd be cool. Narrative, can we justify it in the world of the Division? The Division 2 is set 7, 8, 9 months after a global pandemic. Ooh, worse than ours. And then, yeah, they don't. You know, they're struggling for food, and electricity, and water, and the rest of it. Like, why would there be a fully functioning nightclub? Like, I want to have all the bells and whistles. And I went to the writer, Lauren, and she said, "No, leave it with me." And she came back like a day later, like, we've got a faction that uses drugs. We go a little bit into how these drugs are made in the game, but we can explore that more, and we can say that like the different lights and sounds from the lights and the music, right, stimulate the plant growth in different ways to give you a different hit. And it's like, oh, great, that works. Okay, now I've got buy-in from those two. Production, can we actually make it? Can we get the lighting, VFX, and audio support that we'll need? Because this is distinct stuff, right? This is bespoke, essentially. It's a unique setup. We haven't, you know, the game has a lot of content, but like this stuff needs to be made by scratch. So how do we do that? Okay, yeah, we can, great. Directors, does this align with the game's direction? Something like a nightclub is a little bit out there for the Division, but like, I mean, you'll have seen this in a lot of games already. The base content will be like super serious, and then like as the years go on, you get like your Santa outfits and your chicken outfits and stuff. Like stuff gets a bit more wacky. At this point, we were almost a year post-release, right? And we were a well-oiled machine at making these missions. We knew what we were doing. Directors were very confident in us to be able to deliver. So it was like, yeah, if you guys think you can do this, let's do it. Great, perfect. Signed off, made the mission as you saw it, exactly as we wanted. What could possibly go wrong? No one's going to throw any wrenches in here. Brendan Fraser isn't going to come in and grab a chair and throw it at the production of this mission, right? So obviously something went wrong. Basically half the team moved on to other projects as we just started production on this. So, oh no, the mission is already signed off, It's already in production, and then all these people that we're going to rely on, all that lighting, VFX, audio, poof, gone. So this was scary. But that's game development. It was, like I say, it was a year after launch. They were moving on to other projects. People get redistributed. This is the way it is. So yeah, the mission's already started, but like, the mission's already started. That means that it's designed and planned, right? That means that I had a big design doc. Well, not even that big at UB. It was like 15 slides or something. But in order to get the mission signed off and started and all that good stuff, you have to plan ahead a certain amount so that we all know what we're making. And because we already knew what we were making, everyone was aware of the intent. Everyone was aware of the content that we would need and what we were kind of losing out on by potentially losing these people, right? Likewise, as I was saying earlier, there was public task tracking. Wow. All tasked up, production knew what we needed. Production could kind of take this work and take it away from the people that were no longer on it and then kind of start trying to plug it into other people. Be like, do you have capacity for this? Do you have capacity for this? And the answer naturally was no, because all of a sudden fewer people had more to do all over the game, right? So then it's a case of working with stakeholders to address scope. And again, this is a big production thing, but as a designer, I mean, all of us, this is the point, all of us, it's like, we want to make this thing and we want to make it, absolutely slap. So how can we work to do that? What can we do to make that happen? And the keyword is compromise, right? Where can we not cut corners, but where can we shuffle things around to make it work so that we can get something, even if it's not exactly as intended, something pretty close. And in this case, it meant redistributing a lot of scripting work. So I said earlier, my university course was very technical, my background was kind of technical. Other designers often come from art backgrounds or wherever, architecture, all sorts. But I'm pretty good at scripting. So it's like, okay, so we've got a lot of lights and audio and the rest of it. I can take a bulk of that, so take a bulk of the work off the lighting artists, take a bulk of the work off the technical level designers who would otherwise be scripting this stuff. I can do that myself. And just because of we had a weird schedule at this point where we had a really long time to make this thing, just not many people, but that meant that my responsibilities were stretched out, right? Usually I would be grey boxing and scripting and then chatting with the artists while they arted up and making sure that everything ran the whole time. Instead, here I'd kind of grey box stuff and the art was going, but very slowly, and then I was, so I would have to check in on this stuff, but only every so often as opposed to like all the time. So I had time to do that, and it worked out. Take advantage of asset/setup reuse. Reuse is such a big thing, and you get kind of gamers comparing like animations of, in God of War when he pushes the boat off, and it's like, oh my God, they're using the same animation in God of War 2, and it's like, why would you reinvent the wheel for this thing that only you, one person on Twitter, first name bunch of numbers, is gonna even notice? Like, really silly. But yeah, reuse is a big thing, and it's a smart thing. Obviously, you want to hit the line between smart reuse, where it's like bang for buck, but not so much that it cheapens it. So the two examples that I showed you there are kind of on that line, right? It's very similar sequences, but they bookend the mission, so I hope that I get away with it. And there was a bunch of other stuff in between there. But the mission was already designed so that you would kind of loop back to rooms twice to get 2 encounters out of 1 room. Or like even in that first video there, or both of them actually, you play through the room in one state changes, and then you do another combat encounter in the same room. It's generating more content for the same amount of labor, right? The same amount of work. So it's the smart thing to do. I was already thinking about it, but how can we do that here? And in this case, it's like, okay, if we want to have these cool sequences, we set up one, we figure that out, and then we can do something very similar for the next one. It's like not free, but it means that like once we've figured things out for one, we can really much more easily transfer the setup and the knowledge of that to the next one. Yeah, so what are the key takeaways here? Collaborate with everyone early, because I was talking to so many people so early on. Everyone in the team knew what the mission was, and so when things changed, it meant that we could very quickly adapt to it. Up-to-date docs and task tracking safeguarded us against those unexpected curveballs or thrown chairs. Compromise. Compromise is the name of the game, and what that means is be prepared to cut. And I should clarify, I don't mean like cut people, I mean cut content. And the alternative to cutting is working overtime, which I'm vehemently against. So that's the way it's got to be. And it's difficult, but like you got to know when to do it, and it's going to happen because you don't have infinite time, you don't have infinite money, sadly. And lots of Zoom calls. So working at Ubisoft, we were already. I was in Leamington working with people in Reflections in Newcastle, working with people in the lead studio Massive in Malmo. Like, there's a lot of Zoom calls, and that kind of leads into the next section because we've all had a lot of Zoom calls, right? These last couple of years have been weird. So we've all had a lot of practice at remote working, but I'm gonna basically tell you what I've learned from working remotely. One, at studios where we weren't prepared for it, and two, at a studio that is very prepared for it, because Roll 7 has been remote for about 7 years now, so they knew what they were doing when I joined them, which was very good. So remote working, you love it or you hate it. So remote working is great. I love remote working, and if that rubs you the wrong way, don't worry, we'll be going over the other half of this in a moment. So remote working, I like it because there's no commute. I had to get up today and put jeans on. I never have to do that for work. You can really knuckle down, there's no interruptions. I don't have some like junior artist coming to me and being like, Jacob, don't you think aliens are real? It's like, I don't have time for this right now. I really appreciate being able to just get my work done. It's underrated. Flexibility in schedule, what does that mean? For me, it means a lot of naps at lunch. You can just do that. You couldn't do that in the office unless you found like a secret spot. I don't know if this is an age thing, but naps. Control over your work environment. So I've got like a standing desk, and it's as messy as I like it, and I'm next to a window, you know, and I got a couple of plants and all that good stuff. It's nice, and I've got my sofa just behind me, so I can just have a lie down and a think if I need it, you know, like it's nice. It's nice. I love remote working. So as promised, on the flip side, remote working sucks. As I say, you have control over your work environment, but if you are, for example, a junior just coming into the industry, like that work environment might not be great. You might not have much choice in it. Like it's so dependent on salary, location, life circumstance, you know, like if, for example, a global pandemic hits and you're living in Leamington, which is very expensive, and you can't really afford to, and you're living in this kind of rubbish flat, and you don't even have a desk, you don't have room for a desk, and you're working on a sofa, you've got an IKEA shelf that you put your mouse and keyboard on, and you're working on TV. Man, that was rubbish. That was a bad time. So yeah, that sucks. No casual, unplanned interactions. So yeah, I don't have that junior guy coming to chat to me about aliens, but I don't have any, right? I can't lean over to someone else's desk and just see what they're working on. I don't just run into people in the hallway and get chatting and find out that they're working on something that relates to what I'm working on. You can't just boil the kettle and chat over that. And like for extroverts, it's just like killer. Like I'm an introvert, so I don't mind that so much as mentioned. But like these extroverts, woo, they suffer. And there's so many calls. And there was a time where I was like, well, still am, but less so, but like social anxiety is the whole thing, right? And like calls used to be like real killer, like, oh, gotta sort a bill out, I guess I'll just go cold. No, but like working at Ubisoft and then working through the pandemic, it's like, oh, I'm kind of used to calls. But it takes a whole different kind of energy, right? It's weird. So the kind of bottom line here is that remote working makes collaboration, which I've said is super important, inherently more difficult, like orders of magnitude such. Yeah, that's it. So remote working has pros and cons. I'll readily admit that, even though I love remote working. But yeah, how do we work in these conditions? How do we make it work? There are a few things I've learned, and some of this will be basic stuff, but as mentioned earlier, like the basic stuff isn't always so basic, right? Common sense ain't so common. So tips and tricks. I got some magazine covers here just because I thought they were funny. Remote communications. So this is the kind of boring stuff that hopefully you'll all be better at than people my age and older. But like Slack teams or whatever, you got your messaging. Chat and open channels where possible. So it's really tempting to just like DM a person and be like, oh, you're working on this feature, can you help me out with this? You know, that kind of thing. But what this does is it means that like all of a sudden, it's just a bottleneck. It's just one of those bottlenecks. And as we're talking about removing bottlenecks, greasing the wheels of production, all that stuff. So if you just at someone in a public channel, one, if they're away from their keyboard, it means that someone else can leap in. Two, it means if they're not the right person to talk to about it, like it just means someone else can hop in. Basically means other people can hop in, right? And be like, oh, talk to so-and-so about this. Or if you need to bring someone else in, you can just drag them in straight away. You don't need to make all these group chats or whatever. It's nice, and obviously you still want to chat to people in private about stuff, like if you hate your boss or whatever. But like open channels are good. Utilize threads. If I could break my NDA and just show some screenshots of people not doing this, I would. But it's very annoying. So please just utilize threads. It keeps things nice and compartmentalized. If your client of choice has threads, use them, and it means that you can search through things in particular points. I need to evangelize threads. Just use threads. Don't be afraid to add or trim channels. So when I joined Roll 7, we had one channel for levels, just levels in general, and this was fine for a while until we really got into production, and then all of a sudden 3 levels would be on the go at once because I'd be greyboxing one and my lead would be feeding back, and then Art would be arting one up and I'd be feeding back on that, and then another one would be in the early stages with someone else, So then we added a channel for each level basically, and it was great because now those conversations are contained, you know where to look for them. We worried it was overkill to start with, but it turned out to be very useful. Likewise, don't be afraid to trim. So you have a playtest, you get what you need from the playtest, you chat about the playtest, and then the playtest is done, just kill that playtest channel. Who needs it? I don't need it. This is a classic one, and it's a very easy trap to fall into. Like, you're chatting away, you're sharing screenshots, like, I don't know why this isn't working, or, is this good? I don't know. Basically, if you're chatting over a problem, like on text chat for more than like 3 minutes, whatever makes you uncomfortable, 2 minutes, 5 minutes max, time for a call, just call that person up. It's so much easier and smoother because then you can get on, you can share screens, you can both be on the same page. Chatting with voice is quicker than chatting by text. Just do that. It's like, sorry for this basic stuff, but like some people need telling. If comfortable, please turn on your webcam. We didn't, as humans, we didn't evolve over the phone. We evolved face to face, and there's so many cues that you get from looking at someone in person, such as when a gap in a conversation is about to happen, or if someone else wants to leap in to have a conversation to contribute. So if you're comfortable, please do turn on your webcam. And I know this was a personal thing, but I worked at a place where no one turned on the webcam, and it was like talking to a brick wall. And then I work at Roll 7 where we all do, and it's like talking to human beings, and it's much nicer. Email filters. I could do a whole talk about how much of the job sometimes is just sorting through emails. Thankfully at Roll, we're like a Slack, primarily a Slack studio, so my email volume has gone way down. But in all my previous jobs, I would spend I could be like an hour plus in the morning just sorting through these emails. So do yourself a favor, and it can feel weird because you're not like engaging directly in your actual job. It's like I'm just sorting emails out. But YouTube, how to do filters or whatever, just Google it in your client of choice, set up some folders, set up some filters. You don't need to see everything that comes in. You can filter them in, get them, just get a Jira folder or whatever, and then it's like, then you can just kind of whiz through them in one and be like, all right, I didn't need to know any of that, or like, ooh, good job I saw that comment, but like not being interrupted constantly. And that's another thing for me, which has really helped me out, is turn off notifications. I don't know if this is good industry standard advice, but it's my advice. It's that junior artist talking to you about aliens problem, right? I can all of a sudden compartmentalize that. If I turn off notifications apart from mentions, then all of a sudden I can treat the communication like I treat anything else, which is I can batch it. So I can spend ages working on, 20 minutes working on some exciting level design tasks, such as rotating cubes. And then I can be like, all right, been a while since I checked Slack, let's have a look. Do I need to be anywhere urgently? The rest of it. Check my emails, the rest of it. Do it all in one, and it just allows me to work in much more discrete chunks. For me, it really helps out, and there's a lot of for me there, because the really key thing is finding what works for you, and that's a great thing about remote working. You can take control of how you work. It's all right. This is gonna go at complete odds of what I just said. Find out what works for you. Remember the human. So this isn't so much of a remote thing as just a general tip and trick. But yes, find out what works for you, but remember that what works for you doesn't work for everyone else. Other people work differently, and do try to accommodate them if you can. It's just a whole big thing. Likewise, when these conversations are flying around in text, over calls, whatever, give everyone the space to speak. Games is still predominantly very much white male, and it's kind of, you got to work to make sure that you're not being one of those guys, right? If you're in a male-dominated space, do make room for other people to speak up. Don't be one of these guys, like Annie here is talking about. A few years ago, I was chairing a meeting at work, all men I liked, and me. I said, I'm going to bang my fist on the table every time you interrupt me, so you know how often you do it. Their faces when they realized they did it constantly. They seriously had no clue they did it. This isn't a malicious thing. We live in a society. And these are all guys that she liked. It's just be conscious of it. Be conscious of your own presence. Be conscious of the context that you're in. When you're online, there are tools that you can use, like this very spicy website, which is very interesting. This came up as part of a study because there's a perception that women dominate the conversation when they're only speaking half the time. So if objectively, if a woman is speaking 50% of the time, they did this study, and it's like they do a survey after, and everyone says, oh, they were speaking like 3/4 of the time. And it's like, nah. So be aware of your own bias, be aware of all that kind of thing, please. Give credit where credit's due. This is all wrapped up in the same thing, but it's very easy, especially working in games. You get a lot of, we're a bunch of weirdos, aren't we, basically? And that's fine. But it means that you get people of all personality types. Some people are much quieter than other people. If you notice that they're kind of floating under, but they've got good ideas and the rest of it, do celebrate them. And this is a whole thing. Celebrate your successes. There's been a lot of talk. I'm a very cynical person. There's been a lot of talk of things that have gone horribly wrong, but when things work out, like that nightclub mission, celebrate it, because that is still one of my favorite bits of content that I've worked on, right? And I was chatting with Patrick, the artist that I worked on with it, and he was like, yeah, it was a really good mission. It was nice. It worked well. More remote tips and tricks. This is over-communicate. What a great buzzword. This is one they love at Roll 7, and for good reason. So, an easy one. When I joined Roll, you kind of go through the induction process, you meet your lead, you meet all the other leads, you meet the directors, the rest of it. And the artist that I was going to be working with set up a chat with me just to get to know us, because we'd be working together. And we had a good chat, and we were very much on the same page with all of this stuff that I've been talking about today, how communication is often the thing that ruins, well, not ruins, but derails a good development, right? Especially between artists and level designers, because we're often at odds. That what works for gameplay isn't always what works for making things look good. You have to really work to make those two work together. So we were very much on the same page with that stuff, and it was like, oh yeah, we should make sure we keep in conversation. We should make sure we keep chatting. And I was like, well, why don't we formalize that? Why don't we set a weekly slot where we will have a catch up and go over this stuff? And it's like, yeah, that's a good idea. And that is still going, right? So we still have our weekly thing. It's in the calendar. We know that it's there. We can invite other designers, other artists as needed. And we can also say, do we need to catch up this week? No, I just want to knuckle down. Okay. Or we can say, do we need to catch up this week? And it's like, no, I'm all right. But no, I really need to talk to you about this. It's like, okay, let's have a catch up. And oftentimes, even if you don't think you need one, if you just get chatting, you will solve little problems. You'll sort stuff out. It's the way to go. It's nice. And worst case scenario, you can just talk rubbish with people for 90 minutes on the clock. Don't tell my boss. It's good stuff. Documentation. I'm always in two minds about talking about documentation. It's so easy for documentation to get out of date, and I'm very much in favor of the product itself becoming living documentation. So if I'm greyboxing something like the level itself, telling you what it's going to become later. But documentation, it's really good. I watched Dana Nightingale's talk from Arcane about how they do level design in their studio, and it's a really good talk. But documentation there is actually part of the process. It's tasked up. They've got it's tasked up. It's part of the process. They have time set aside for it, which sounds really good. They need to keep up to date. But documentation that can help you out: tutorials, wikis, trackers. I've got a big spreadsheet guys. Made a lot of trackers at Roll, just for helping keeping people on the same page, keeping things going. Try to avoid walls of text, like this entire talk has been. It's good to have annotated pictures, GIFs. Anissa, our UI UX expert, is really good at making these little GIFs that just show what she's making or what she intends to make, because then you can just immediately feedback on that, right? You don't need to be describing something, you just send that away. And videos. I will often record a little 30-second to 2 minutes, ideally, sometimes 5 minutes. One time 9 minutes. Don't do that. A little video about what we're doing, because games are such a visual medium. They're called video games. Just show, don't tell. That's the bottom line. I tried to get a relevant example for like, annotated pictures and the rest of it. And all I had was this stupid tweet that I made for Blocktober, making fun of other level designers. But then I did find some real examples, and it's exactly what you imagine, right? It's just like show things, make things clear. Instead of describing, this is the route from the level. First you go from here, then you go here, then you go there. Just annotate it. Use the visual medium, use the fact that everyone's got a screen in front of them. It's good stuff. And while I'm talking about kind of utilizing this stuff to get the point across, and I just hinted at it, actually. Look at this, all gray, literal gray box. This is level design. How readable is that? Where is the player going to or from? I just spoiled it by showing you the annotated version, but like, just from looking at it, you can't really tell. Is that the floor? What are these gray things? I don't know. Where's the objective? Compare it to the color version, where it's like, all right, the big yellow building is the objective. That's not a floor. It is a floor, but it's all flooded. It's water, okay. And then we've got some crash trains and the rest of it. It's much more readable, right? And this is something I'm very passionate about, is that communication and collaboration isn't just talking to each other, setting up email filters. You can communicate within your work, and this straddles a lot of disciplines. It's easier in some than others. As a level designer, it's very core to what I do. So show intent in the gray box using colors, shapes, labels. Another stupid example I have off Twitter is that for that nightclub mission, me and the artist Patrick, we were researching a lot of nightclubs, and they often have these like landmark areas or corridors or whatever. And it was like, we want to make one of these. It's like, Patrick, you want to make this? Oh, he wants to make one of these. Great. And it's good for me for the mission pacing, because it means that I've got a bit of transitory space, not always in a high intensity, just a little bit of space for players to chill out. And it's another photo mode opportunity, so that's why they have them in nightclubs, right? To get pictures, to get on the gram. That's why we have photo mode in games, so that we can get screenshots on Reddit. Yeah, it's cool. But when I was greyboxing this, and if I could show pictures, it would be so much better. But just imagine a bunch of yellow and orange cubes, and on top of a doorway, it just says wacky corridor. And that's it. And then you go in, and it's just a regular square corridor. And I knew what it was. Patrick knew what it was. I had to change it at some point to be like landmark corridor so that directors could digest it. But it was just a label. And that stayed there until the art got done, and we got this beautiful looking photo mode opportunity. And it's very cool. Lighting was involved, scripting, the whole shebang. It was wonderful. But it's as simple as that. Instead of having this in a document somewhere, like there will be a corridor that is cool, just in the game. Anyone can see it when they play through. Perfect. Likewise, artists, like organize your work. This is like really boring stuff like make your hierarchies navigable, properly label your layers. This is kind of morbid, but the idea is that if you got hit by a bus today, would someone else be able to pick up your work tomorrow and just like get into it, or would they need to spend like 5 days reverse engineering, relabeling stuff, making stuff so they can actually understand it? Code, make it human readable for humans. Use a lot of comments, variable, class, function names, make them sensible. This goes for people that are not coders, that are doing scripting and stuff like that. Basic stuff, but I can never hammer home the basics enough. And this is kind of the conclusion that I'm building to, right? Communication and collaboration aren't part of game development, right? Game development is communication. And this is when you're working with people, and as a designer, I'm communicating to the player at home with my work as well. Like it runs through the whole thing. Likewise, just going to bring this back because I spent so long putting all these arrows in, making this ugly, horrendous diagram. But game development is collaboration, like fundamentally. Unless you're like the 1 in 7 billion people that make a game by themselves and actually release it, and it goes anywhere, you will be working in a team. You will be working in a team. So that's that. Thank you very much. I think now it's question time, so.
Okay, thank you, Jacob Mills. Anybody got any questions? I'm going to start this side 'cause I'm over here.
Yeah. Have you worked on any of the Ubisoft games, or is it just the Division?
Tom Clancy's The Division 2. Tom Clancy's The Division 2 Classified Assignment DLC. Unannounced title in pre-production, and Far Cry 6. That was my Ubisoft career.
Okay, who's next? I'm going to go this side.
Cheers. You said about the level you made, the nightclub level, that it had a couple bits of cut content. What is it that you cut, or can you not tell us that?
Key thing is, can I remember it? It was a few years ago now. I'll be honest. So we made it work, right? All that compromise that I'm talking about. Be prepared to cut is definitely a thing, but like just because of the circumstances that we were in there, it was like it was one point on the slide, but like me taking on a scripting work, that was a huge chunk of work, and it only worked because we had the amount of time that we had. If we were working on a regular schedule, we had an in-office meme. It was 100 days to make this mission, and usually we'd have a quarter of that with 4 times as many people, right? So it was weird, a weird amount of time to be working on something. So I don't think for that one we cut anything. I think it just stretched out, and there's a whole thing in there, like, so I showed off the bombastic moments, but I had this really elaborate puzzle, and I basically, I don't often get time to kick my heels, but on this mission I did, I spent it making a really elaborate puzzle. So in the end, it all worked out, but it was hairy. It was hairy. It's easier to talk about it now, but at the time it was like, what are we going to do? So.
I just wanted to also ask about, when you're coming up with ideas, you said with the nightclub, you were just at a party at a nightclub.
Yeah.
Is there any other way that you find like inspiration to come up with your levels, or like how do you come up with your ideas and how do you sort of prepare them?
Yeah, it's a whole thing, and it's again, everyone's process is slightly different. For me, it boils down a lot to, I can boil the job down to like different phases of like planning, research, planning, design, implementation, iteration, and polish. And it's those research and planning phases. So it's an awful lot of, if you don't know where to start, trying to find like a good setting is interesting. So like the nightclub was one. The previous mission we worked on was just, we'd been working on the Division so long, and that was set in Washington, D.C. We were constrained by what was in the city, but all of a sudden we were making these DLC missions, and it's like we can be a little bit more fantastical. So what could be around, like sewers, prisons, caves. So like the first DLC mission that I made was this big Bond villain style underground data center, and it's like, there's nothing like that in DC that we know of, but like, it's like, it was something different and something that we wanted to make that was just cool, right? Something that we could make cool. And make cool things is kind of bad advice, but like that's kind of where it starts for me. And the other thing is, if not setting, if you know what kind of game you're making, if you know what genre you're making, sometimes I'll just throw some shapes, not like fucking dancing, like make some interesting shapes, like compose some interesting scenes, just try and make something that you're into. Like those nightclub rooms that I made, I really struggled with for a long time because nothing felt like I wasn't getting across the scale of the space that I wanted, right? And we ended up with what we saw there, which is like these rooms that you kind of come into and you've got a good vista and everything's framed nicely. It took a lot of time. Sometimes it just takes time. Just try stuff, throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Again, that's not like a great thing, but let's go back to those research and planning phases. Those are super important. Lots of reference material. Keep a big pure ref or whatever, Pinterest, whatever, of just pictures of cool stuff, and then as you collect that, you can just kind of go back over it over time and just be like, oh yeah, that's cool. Maybe I can do something like that.
Okay, so I've got one online. Marshall Smith says, do the levels get easier to make after all these years?
Sometimes, and sometimes no. That's a great question because I wish the answer was yes. But the answer is no, because you can... this game that I'm working on currently, I've got some great examples, but I can't talk about it. But I'll talk about it in a vague way. I joined the project, we had vertical slice, and so the levels already knew what kind of setting it was, and it had already been partially designed by the creative director, and it was just like, polish this up, let's get it out the door, okay. And then my level design instincts kick in, and I try and do all kinds of stuff to fix it, but like basically, you join a new game, you join a new genre. Like, so I worked on Lego games, and then I went to work on the Division, shooting guys. That's a big change, right? You kind of have to relearn the job at that point. And I've found that in every role, in every job, even going from Division to Far Cry, it's like they're both shooters, but one's cover-based, and the other one is, you can use cover, but you can also just get a flamethrower out and that kind of thing. So you kind of have to relearn the job. and then you get comfortable, and then you get comfortable, and that's another danger, because then you can, you know, make a good level or something, and people are like, yeah, it's a good level, and then it's like, okay, make the next one, and it's like, oh, how do I make the next one different enough to the other one, but distinct, unique, good? How do I make something different but good? I learned how to make good for this one. How do I make good for this one? That can be really tricky, and you can get like design block like you get writing block, right? It can be tricky, and again, I fall back on those things I was just mentioning, like get your reference material out, get your big archive of stuff, just see what we can do, just throw some stuff in and see what sticks. And then sometimes you get an idea, and then sometimes it'll work, and then sometimes you'll make a whole thing and you'll present it to your lead and directors, and they'll say, nah, that's not the kind of game we're making. And you go, oh no. But then you can home in and say, what kind of game are we making? And what was wrong with this? How can I amend it? And when you've got direction that knows what they want, sometimes you need to show someone something they don't like so they can tell you what they do like, and that can help, because then you're working within those constraints, and the constraints can guide the process. I went on a few tangents there. It's a whole thing. Short answer, no, but you learn these techniques to get over it quicker or move it along, and you make some content, and it works out, hopefully. Yes.
From when you started doing level design, how would you say that the technology and everything's changed? Like from when you started in a career in level design to working on games like Far Cry 6 now, how would you say that it's changed over that time? Would you say it's easier, harder, somewhere in between?
It's an interesting one. So my first design job was in 2014. So to me, that's not long ago. It seems like yesterday, but like, I think that's an interesting question. The main things that have changed are how accessible this knowledge is. When I was getting into games, I mean, to start with, I honestly didn't know design was a discipline at all. My university course was very programming heavy. My first job was a programmer job, and then a design role came up, and it's like, oh, hang on, that's describing all the bits that I like doing more than I like coding. Like, some people love coding, and good for them, because they make the code that we need, and I don't want to do it. But I was always coding as a means to an end to make a game, right? I always wanted to make the games. I always saw design as the fun job that I was stealing off everyone else. So yeah, just like, it's more accessible now. We've got more talks. We've got more channels like GMTK and NoClip and the rest of it talking about how games are actually made. So there's that side of it. In terms of technology, I've worked with some good engines, and I've worked with some bad engines, and time doesn't seem to be a factor. It's just like, trying to say this without breaking NDAs and without being like really hyper cynical. Sometimes stuff's bad, and that's just a result of bad. Sometimes the technology isn't where you want it to be. Sometimes things are buggy, like the engines are as buggy as the games, or worse. And sometimes you're really working against it, and that's not changed over time for me. It's been a thing that's cropped up here and there, just almost at random. Nowadays, like Roll7 makes games in Unity. Unity has so much documentation. Like any problem that I have, I can just Google, right? And someone has probably already solved it, as opposed to working in-house at Ubisoft, where you've got documentation, but like it's not Googleable. Like there's not like hundreds of people out there with the same problem trying to find solutions to the same problem. Like the challenges haven't. It's not been like a time thing. It's just been a situation thing. In terms of how games are made, games are more complex than ever, but the tools are getting better. I've just kind of contradicted that. The tools are broadly getting better. The workflows are broadly getting better. You know, like, we're all kind of, but the thing is, I am rambling now. As you get used to something, or as like something becomes standard, things change. So like the new consoles have SSDs in them, so all of a sudden loading, we don't need to worry about that so much. Like we can still use our cool, like, you know, shimmy between two tight walls thing to hide loading as a pacing thing. We don't need to do it to hide loading. We can use it purely as a narrative device, but we don't need it like we used to need it. We don't need these long elevator rides in Mass Effect anymore. As you get used to something, things change. As those things change, tools change, processes change, desires change, and like what you actually want to make. So the job never gets old. That's for sure. I hope that's some kind of answer.
Okay, so I've got a long one online again. So John Smith says, is there a hint of player psychology used when you create levels? like where you would want the player to go in the level and lead them through, and what makes you think differently to encourage the player to think differently for rewards and progression?
So short answer, yes, absolutely. And it's it can be a really tricky problem. So like if you look up any kind of level design 101 kind of stuff, it's like composition, framing. When you walk into a room, what can you see? You want like, so maybe I could skip all the way back to it. It's like a million slides back. When you go into, let me do it. We'll just make it up. But like when you walk into that nightclub level that I had earlier, don't know if you can see. So obviously I've taken the screenshot after all the enemies are dead. But you walk into this room, you got a bunch of guys right in front of you, right? Simple. They're right in front of you. You can't miss them. But that means that you're clearing cover out the way to make that sight line. But also in the Division, I need cover to get into so that I'm safe. And Division is a tactical-ish game. I need to get in cover and assess the situation, or go in all guns blazing. But we need to offer the option, right? And then likewise, it's like, where do we want to lead players around here? So I've got a bar on the left that's kind of obscuring the view around the corner. So players are naturally led to the right here towards the stage. And that's good because then when the lights come back on, all the enemies come from what was the back of the room, but is now the right of the room in this screenshot. So we're on the stage now, and the situation has changed. So framing composition is one. Lighting is a huge thing. If you put a light on a door, people will go to that door. Simple. Likewise, you'd be surprised how many games just have big arrows in the environment pointing you in places and you don't notice. And there's nothing clever there, it's literally a big arrow. And then there's kind of this fallback. Almost every game that I've worked on has had grand ideas that like, we're going to lead players around just with the environment. This is going to be the one. Level design here is going to be incredible. And then like 2 weeks before ship, it's like, nah, let's put in loads of UI. Let's put in some blips and dots, and so players know where they're going, because people are getting lost. So it's a really tricky thing to do properly. It's especially tricky to do in open worlds, and I've worked on a lot of open worlds because they're open. But it's stuff like that. You can lead players along these routes, but like it's a really key thing when you're making levels to put these things, or making games in general, put them in a player's hand. Don't give them any preamble. Just watch them play, see where they get stuck and lost, and be like, we need to sort that out. So yeah, it's a big thing. It's a big consideration. It takes a lot of work to get right.
Okay, so another one online. I think this one's very relevant to students. But Scarlett Pearson Scott said, what do you do when you hit the wall in your level design? Yeah,
talking a bit about it earlier, right? So as I was saying earlier, like get your reference material together, just scroll through that stuff. Throw things at the wall, see what sticks. Classic. The other thing is having a team around you. If you have a team around you, utilize them. So as I was just saying again, get them to play the content, watch them, ask them for feedback, and then like it's good to have a variety of voices. Artists will have an art's eye view on it. Coders will probably tell you that it's running too slowly and we are not allowed to use mesh colliders or whatever. But like everyone will have a different perspective, and you can like these good ideas can come from the most unexpected places. I can't talk about the game that I'm working on. But like there was a thing that was a certain way, and then narrative wrote a thing, and it was like, oh, we could kind of tie that into this other thing. And that's like a terrible example without any specifics. But the point is the ideas can come from anywhere, right? And it was a good idea, and it's like, oh, let's do that. If you hit a wall, it's the same as any other writer's block or whatever. Like, find what works for you, lie down on the sofa, take a walk in the park. Half of my best ideas come to me in the shower. Anything goes, you know. Hopefully that's some kind of useful. Sorry if not.
Okay, any in-room questions?
How different would you say is level design when you're making a PvP game compared to a PvE game?
Very. Yeah, it's a great question. I've not worked on that. I've not worked on any PvP. Only in my spare time. But like if I think about making a Division mission, for example, I'm just drawing all my examples from Division because I was on it for a few years and it's good. But like I was saying earlier, you walk into a room, you want to see all the enemies, right? You want to see where things are. Like you often want to have like a little high up perch so that you can get up and get your sniper rifle out and survey the situation. You want to have different corridors. Maybe you want to have a little bit that's like good for shotguns, so a lot of corners and that kind of thing. All this stuff kind of favors the player. When you're working on PvP, you don't want to favor one side, really, unless you're making like an attack-defend thing. You most likely want it to be even so that it's fair. And that's more difficult to do. So how do you provide good sight lines without it being unfair and stuff? So a good example is Halo Infinite just came out, and they had one of the maps in the ranked thing was Behemoth, which is very open, and you've got your two bases, but they were finding in ranked play a lot of players were just getting the sniper rifle and just going to one corner and dominating the entire field of view. It happens, but like that's not fun, right, for the other team, or it doesn't even encourage good play, right? You want, as a designer, your objective really is to facilitate the game so that it plays the way that it's intended to be played, which hopefully is the most rewarding, you know, if it's a fun game, fun, if it's a scary game, scary, you know, that kind of thing. Like, how do we utilize the mechanics, the setting, the environment, the rest of it, to make this experience the experience we want the players to have? So yeah, in a PvE game, that's usually a power fantasy straight up. Like, I want to go in and blast all these dudes and use my space wizard powers or whatever. In PvP, it's competitive. It's they're different challenges, and there's a lot of great resource out there. But I'm not going to be able to solve it like right now. But like, yeah, in short, yes, they're different considerations.
Okay, so another good one that I think would help a lot of students with not knowing like where they want to go into. But Reese Hunt has put, would you ever consider a more overseeing job rather than the games development bit?
Are we talking like?
So like management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been a whole. That's a really interesting question because you'll have those conversations with people years into their careers, like now, and I've been having those conversations recently because for a very long time, this is just me personally now. This is just story time. I was working at TT on the Lego Games and really resonated with a lot of that because you get to be really silly in Lego games and you can throw out the strangest ideas and then they happen, right? Which is really fun. I miss that sometimes. But things were going well, and I was already taking on some like extra responsibilities, like bringing on secondments, onboarding new people and that kind of thing. But at the time, I'd only been in design there for 2 or 3 years. I didn't want to be a lead at that point. I want to keep designing, because when you become a lead or a manager, you still have that oversight, right? But you get your hands much less dirty. You have much less time to actually do stuff yourself. It's much more time feeding back, playing the game, having an awful lot of meetings and conversations with people to facilitate that mess that we were talking about earlier. So it's a whole thing. And so you kind of, especially in like AAA, right, where team sizes are really big, you can have your like lead track and your seniority track. So I have personally gone down the seniority track till now, until very recently thinking about what I want to do, and it's like, yeah, ultimately one day I want to be the guy telling the people like me that their ideas are totally wrong. So I'd like to be creative director one day. So I am now just starting to look at the lead track and, you know, getting more experience doing that kind of thing, and managing people and doing all the boring tasks like scoping stuff out and all the boring tasks. Someone's got to do it. So yeah, it's definitely 2 avenues to consider, but like you're not locked into one. You can always just move. I've worked at a number of studios. Once you're in, you know, so.
Okay, any more in-room questions?
Have there been any other like games that you've either like been offered to work on and then turned down, or any games that you've wanted to work on but never got the chance to?
Yeah. It depends. Again, it depends on the individual. But like, and it can feel a little bit cheeky. But like, I occasionally, when thinking about moving, apply to a bunch of places, even when I'm just thinking about it, just to see kind of where I'm sat in the pool. So around 2019, which was a couple of years before I ended up leaving UB, I fired off a bunch of applications. I got pretty far with Guerrilla on, because they were making Horizon 2 at the time. And a lot of good chats, a lot of good stuff. Didn't get the job. Not bitter about it, it's fine. it all worked out for me. But short answer, yes. Like, you end up applying for many more jobs than you get. And there's a lot of jobs that's like, oh, I'd love to work on that. Like, for me as level designer, Arcane is kind of like top tier level design, like Dishonored and Prey, and I haven't played Deathloop yet, but I'm about to. So they're top tier for me. Other studios like that. I'm really happy with Roll 7 because I spent ages working on open worlds and really enjoying single player linear games, right? and I really like games about like using your reflexes and, you know, action games and stuff. So I'm very happy to be working on action games. But yeah, short answer, everyone has a different path in this industry and you'll likely get a lot of rejections, but you'll, you know, keep at it, you get places.
Okay, so this one's from Layla Godwin saying, what is your favorite or, do you know what, I can't remember what she's put. Favorite or most satisfying part of being a developer?
Favorite most satisfying part, it's like the nightclub stuff. It's when a plan comes together. It's a lot of hard work, right? And as I've mentioned, a lot of stuff can go wrong. It's a lot of hard work, but when it all comes together, it's the most satisfying thing in the world. And when you see someone play something that you've made, and then you've put in a little thing, and you know not everyone's going to notice it, but if someone notices that thing, it's like, yes. So I brought out like one of the favorite things I ever worked on was the Sonic world in Lego Dimensions, because I was my parents won a Mega Drive when I was 2 years old. I'm a Sonic kid. Got to go fast. And getting to work on Sonic was amazing. I got to put in all the stuff that I like, but I also got to put in all this like dumb stuff that I like. We had loads of Omochow around who would give like stupid hints like, move your legs to run. And I put one on top of the death egg, and that's where that stupid hint was. And it's just like watching people discover little things like that. It's just like, yes. Yeah, watching people play things and it going to plan is great, as opposed to watching people play things and it not going to plan, which is like life-destroying. But like that's why you have play tests. You get that out of the way early, so that by the time you release it, it's just like primo. Yeah.
Okay. Any more in room? Okay. So, what would? Oh no, we'll go with this one first. How many people does it take to actually make one level?
Depends on the game. So. For demonstration purposes, when I was working remotely with UB Toronto on Far Cry, the level design department alone was 30 people, and that was across a couple of studios, or it might have been just in Toronto, but they were working with Montreal as well. Big team, and that team, well, there's hundreds of people at those studios. Montreal is a campus, it's 3,000 people big, working on multiple games, but like that gives you a kind of idea of big games, right? Big teams, as opposed to 30 level designers just on level design. I think that was just in world design as well, so they had like an equivalent amount just for missions, something like that. Ridiculous amount of people. Contrast that to me working at Roll 7, where there's 30 people on the project total. I am the level design department, right? That's it. So it really varies, and obviously the scope of the game changes drastically, AAA, indie, and all that stuff, but like it varies wildly.
Okay, so when working for big companies or on big projects, how difficult is it to get your idea across when things need to be changed?
Very. Again, it depends on the project, depends on the studio, it depends on the processes, depends on the stage in the project, so many dependents. As a designer, especially like in the trenches, sometimes at the big companies, you really only have control over your particular slice of content. And sometimes you have to make those concessions and be like, I can only control what I can control. And that's this bit. I can only make a nightclub level. I can't change like games like Division come out and you get a lot of people complaining about loot or gameplay or the rest of it. It's like, I can't do anything about any of that. My chunk of content is this chunk of content, this little bit. And that's what I care about, and that's what I can do. And that's one of the reasons, after many years in AAA, that I personally moved over to a smaller studio, because I wanted more of that control, right? This is a whole thing. Like, one's not better than the other, they're just different. So when you're working in a big studio and you are in a position like mine, where you do what I was saying earlier, the research, the planning. At UB, it would then be, a process of pitching. So it's like I have come up with a set of locations that I would like to make missions in, pitch it to directors, after pitching it to the team, because you have to get them on board first, and then pitch it to directors, and they will say yeah or no, or they will say so for those missions, like earlier I was saying, one of them was in like an underground cave, that kind of thing. The other locations that we pitched were like a hospital, just sewers in general, I think, like flood protection kind of stuff. We had a bunch of other weird locations. An aquarium was another one, and that was one that got made by the other cell working in parallel. So you can then do that stuff and then get it across, and then you have to make the thing, right? But again, like, then you're kind of locked in and you're making the thing to these specifications, and it has to fit in the direction of the game. It has to fit in where in the game it's coming out. It has to, yeah, it can be tricky. And it's hard work to navigate that sometimes and figure out what's good and what works and what doesn't. Like on my current project, it took me a while to get in sync with the direction. It's still tricky. It's always a tricky thing. So it just takes work.
Okay, so I'm not going to get through all these, but does anybody in the room got a question? Okay, so I'll do a couple more. So Ben Price has put, does a game that you have worked on, when you play that game, does it take the excitement out of it playing it?
It depends on the game. So the Lego games, I'm going to try and enjoy Lego Star Wars when it comes out, because I know a lot of guys that worked on it. We'll see. I mean, it looks very different. It looks like they refreshed a lot of the formula, so we'll see. Weirdly, with Division, I had never played it before I worked at UB, and then I played through the first game for about 130 hours, just casually for fun, getting familiar with the game as well, but like, you know, it grabbed me. And then obviously playing Division 2 for thousands of hours while making it, and then I ended up putting about 130 into that one as well when it came out. Division is very satisfying gunplay. I really enjoyed it, and I knew what kind of gear game I wanted, so it was fun. This one that I'm working on now, we'll see. We'll see. It's a different kind of game. Can't talk about it.
Okay, so I think this is a good one. So is your game development knowledge that you learned from university still relevant when it comes to level design? And how easy is it to shift your role?
Right, two great questions. So first off, about my university experience. My university wasn't that, my personal university experience wasn't that relevant to what I ended up going into. So this is no one's fault, really. But this was a big symptom of the course in particular. So it was Queen's Belfast computing. At the time, I don't think they'd actually had any graduate go into a games job. It really was the computing course with a couple of games modules in there. And I ended up doing a lot of computing programming stuff, and then as soon as I could, moved into design, right? So I had a little bit of experience in design from the course, but most of it I learned on the job, which is probably not what we want to hear, but like it is so dependent on the course, right? Individually. How difficult is it to change? Does it change discipline, change role? So I went from programming to design. Again, this is like not what you want to hear, but there was a lot of luck involved. I started at TT and as a programmer, and on the Friday, an internal junior designer role came up, and I was like, I didn't even know that was a job. And then I spent like 3 weeks agonizing about having just landed my first games role after months of applying. It was November after graduating that I got that role. Am I going to throw it all away by letting my boss know that I want to jump ship to this other department? But I went for it. My lead was very supportive. We had an interview. I joined the team. My programming knowledge was a boon. Like it's good to have cross-discipline knowledge because you can leverage that in your job, right? And so that's why I'm saying, like, there's no such thing as a typical route into the industry or into any particular role. We get people from all sorts: architecture, art, QA, wherever, stacking shelves. If the portfolio is good enough, right? The key thing is to make stuff, and if you make stuff like the stuff that you want to be making professionally, then you'll have a stronger portfolio for that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just about highlighting the areas that you want to highlight and pushing them forward when you apply places, when you show yourself off.
Okay, last chance, guys. Anybody? Okay, so the final one then is what would be the one thing that you tell an upcoming level designer?
Portfolio. Portfolio, portfolio, portfolio. It's all about portfolio. You don't necessarily need a degree or whatever. If your portfolio is strong enough, it will get you through. And like that can be in a game engine, sure, but it can be using mod tools. It can be using, you know, Halo Forge, Doom Snap Map. It can be in Minecraft. It can be in Fortnite. You know what I mean? Like it can, if you make a level and you say, this is what I want to get from this. This is what I want players to do. This is what I want players to feel. Or this is the experience that I want you to have. This is what I did. This is what I learned doing it. This is what actually happened. It's all good stuff, like Mario Maker, anything. Just make stuff, right? And then show it off. And then strengthen that portfolio. That's what we pay attention to.
Awesome. So thank you for that insight to the games development and the games industry. Jacob Mills, everybody.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, Jacob, if you'd like to wait around a few minutes while everybody leaves. The RS cohort, you've got a talk at 12 o'clock. If you go to rooms 208 and 210, you can access your online talk through that in that space. Everybody else, you're welcome to leave.